Welcome, everyone, to Saving a National Treasure, the People's Postal Service. The New England Classical Singers will perform our national anthem. Would you all please stand under the direction of David Hodgkins.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets that glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Thank you.
Scott. To get started, I want to acknowledge the following people: Director Barbara McNamara and Maura Deems, and the library staff for their generous hospitality. Please come on in. Dr. Stephen Hutkins, a leading advocate for the post office, who runs the influential website Save the Post Office. His article titled "Introducing the New USPS Sorting and Delivery Centers" is the major source of the data and text used in my communications with local, state, and federal officials. Jamie Partridge, former political director of the National Association of Letter Carriers, 82, current delegate to the Northwest Oregon Labor Council, AFL-CIO. His efforts have been tremendously helpful in promoting this event. He'll be joining us by phone. Wes Murphy, executive director of Andover TV, and the crew for broadcasting this event. Our guest speakers are Jamie Partridge, Peter Blunt, a military veteran and retired USPS mail carrier with over 20 years of experience. Dave Stager, a rural letter carrier in Western Michigan and a member of Communities and Postal Workers United. He'll join us by phone. Steve Hoffman, president of Boston Metro, American Postal Workers Union. Also with us is Diana Klein, president of the American Postal Workers Union, Mid-Hudson in Newburgh, New York. I'm Bill Colby, retired Andover High School and Northern Essex Community College teacher, and I'm an Andover resident concerned about what lies ahead for our loyal USPS mail carriers and co-workers and the services they provide to our community and beyond. Several weeks ago, I read details about the Delivering for America plan on patch.com, a network of local news sites, on SaveThePostOffice.com, and on USPS websites. This is directly from the USPS website. The Delivering for America plan was published on March 23rd, 2021 to transform the United States Postal Service from an organization in financial and operational crisis to one that is self-sustaining and high-performing. Some key points of the plan are to record a net profit in 2024 sustainable for 10 years. 95% or better on-time performance across all products. Stabilizing workplace availability nationally, and invest in core postal infrastructure. There are integral parts of the plan like the delivery unit optimization, the consolidated sorting and delivery centers, a maximum transit reach time of 30 minutes between the sorting delivery center and the delivery routes. Our panel will sort out parts of this plan for us tonight. Bottom line, the Andover carriers would have to do a daily round trip to Woburn to deal with the mail on top of their delivery routes. Sorting operations will be removed from the Stevens Street Post Office and moved to Woburn. This also applies to the mail carriers and facilities in Tewksbury, Middleton, North Reading, and Wakefield. Last Friday morning at 8:10 a.m., I did a trial run on Route 28 between the Woburn Post Office and Stevens Street to see if the trip can be accomplished within the reach time of 30 minutes. It took me 36 minutes, and there are 18 stoplights on the route if you go Route 28, Woburn Street, West Street to the facility. The Delivering for America plan creates issues not only for the carriers. This plan will impact the entire USPS workforce as well as its operations and financial management. Tonight, we will hear from experts, people with firsthand knowledge of carrier operations, experience in postal business and operations management. Jamie Partridge will give an overview of the massive changes coming to over 4,000 post offices and tens of thousands of mail routes across the country, including Andover. Peter Blunt will express his concern for the safety of the carriers driving old vehicles on major highways. Dave Stager will inform us about practical problems with the sorting and delivery centers consolidation plan. And Scott Hoffman will let the community know that they're being sold a faulty bill of goods. We are gathered in this historic edifice raised as a public monument to Civil War veterans. We are here exercising what a community can and should do, facing change, practice civility and civic mindedness. About 80 years before this library was built, the Constitution was ratified to give Congress the power to establish post offices and post roads, and to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for executing this task. According to Jamie Partridge, currently none of the national postal unions, not the Postal Regulatory Commission, nor any congressional committees are calling for national hearings on this transformation. From Jeff Crosby, former president of the International Union of Electrical, Salaried, Machine, and Furniture Workers, Communication Workers of America, Local 201, and North Shore Labor Council, President retired, saving the post office as a public good has a lot to do with saving democracy in our country. From a worker out in Denver, Colorado. I'm a postal worker in Denver, Colorado with 43 years of experience. I am very happy to hear of your work to inform your community about the big changes planned for mail carriers in Andover. The public supports the United States Postal Service and wants it to stay healthy, but people don't know what is going on. And people are not mobilized to express their wishes. I think active community support is the key to putting the USPS back on the right path. From Senator Markey, during this coronavirus pandemic, the USPS is more important than ever. And we owe a debt of gratitude to the frontline postal service workers who have kept unemployment checks, direct cash assistance, and other mail moving. We must not allow anything to undermine this critical institution and disrupt or delay access to critical mail, such as life-saving medications, bill payments, or ballots for elections. There are many people who stepped up and pitched in support for the carriers. The carriers deserve answers, they deserve a voice, they deserve to be heard. In probably the first public meeting concerning this issue in our nation, we will hear firsthand from mail carriers and top union personnel facts, data, and personal experiences that profoundly teach us about the human endeavors and intricate operations making the United States Postal Service the world's largest postal operator. Here, in this hallowed meeting room, we will bear witness and hear open discussion concerning the corporate proposals that change the People's Postal Service. I'm now going to call Jamie, and he's going to give a presentation. Jamie.
Yes, here I am.
Oh, excellent, Jamie. You're coming in loud and clear. Okay, you're on. The audience is here.
Oh,
We have a good
all
turnout
right.
for you.
Good evening. I'm sorry I cannot be with you in person, but since I live here in Portland, Oregon, I'm with you by phone. As Bill said, I'm Jamie Partridge, a retired mail carrier and organizer with Communities and Postal Workers United, a national network of local coalitions to save our public postal service. And we've been organizing for 10 years, since the first wave of cuts, closures, and consolidations of post offices and postal mail processing plants in 2012. We learned quite a bit back then, which should help us resist the latest assault on our national treasure, the People's Postal Service. From 2011 to 2015, the U.S. Postal Service separated over 2,700 mail courier units from the back of their neighborhood post offices. That's 2,700 out of 25,000 post offices that have courier units in the back, and placed them in what was called detached courier units. These DCUs were often close to the neighborhood post office and meant to improve efficiency of mail sorting and delivery. Customers in the zip code could travel from the retail unit to the delivery unit down the street, but a study conducted by the USPS Office of the Inspector General found out that little money was saved, that having to visit two postal facilities was inconvenient for customers, and that fewer postal clerks at the retail post office meant reduced hours, contracting of the retail unit to private parties, merger with other post offices, relocation to a strip mall, or closure altogether. Oh my goodness, there's pictures of me on the screen. I shouldn't look at those. All right, I hope it's not distracting. Okay, the good news is that by organizing town meetings like this one and engaging elected officials and confronting postal authorities, most of these post offices escaped closure. The bad news is that most of them had their hours reduced from 8 hours a day to 6 or 4 or even 2 hours a day. Today, we face a much more massive assault on our local post offices and mail carriers. The delivery unit optimizations, DUOs, that is removing mail carriers from their post offices to sorting and delivery centers, S&DCs, will force workers to commute 15 to 30 minutes longer to work and then the same time back to the delivery routes, plus the reverse at the end of the day, adding 1 to 2 hours to their current day. Bill Colby tells me that most Andover carriers north of town so commute to the S&DC in Woburn will take as much as an extra hour. And as happened 10 years ago, the impact on postal customers will be significant. The Postmaster General, DeJoy, a Republican megadonor and Trump crony with no postal experience, took over the helm over 2 years ago. And during that time, he has raised prices, cut hours, delayed the mail, but has backed off some of his harebrained schemes when huge public outcry, including rallies and protests at 800 post offices across the country just prior to the 2020 elections, and lawsuits by over a dozen states forced him to retreat. So we know that he can be moved. DeJoy's latest move, his 10-year plan for America, includes 7,000. Recently, he lowered it to 4,000 post offices losing their carrier units, affecting tens of thousands of mail carriers. This promises to be the most massive change in postal operations in decades. Andover is one of the first 200 delivery unit optimizations, and Woburn is one of the first 21 sorting and delivery centers. Other nearby towns which will have their carrier units moved to Woburn are Middleton, North Reading, Tewksbury, and Wakefield. This first wave is scheduled to be completed by February. Not far off. I'll let other mail carriers talk about the impact of these commutes and travel times on their personal lives, childcare, family, transportation cost, and recruitment and retention of employees. These changes would compound the number one problem impacting delivery of the mail today. That is understaffing, retention of employees. Currently, the Postal Service is so understaffed that some towns get mail delivery only a few days a week. A vicious cycle of understaffing started with Postal during the pandemic, and then others quitting due to being forced to work 10 and 12-hour days, 6 and 7 days a week, and the very few new postal workers to replace them because wages are just too low. So the retention rate of postal workers for the first year now is less than 50%. Add to this a long commute with DeJoy's new plan, and you can see where this is going. DeJoy, as I said, has no postal experience, but he does have trucking and logistics experience. His former company, XPO, is a major over-the-road trucking contractor with the Postal Service. Since DeJoy has been Postmaster General, XPO has landed $120 million in additional trucking contracts. My. DeJoy has eliminated airmail for first-class letters and magazines, saying that trucking is more reliable, though slower. DeJoy's plan for his big SNDC hubs, with hundreds of letter carriers coming in from surrounding neighborhoods and towns, is modeled after the big private logistics firms like UPS and FedEx, who also gather their delivery units in massive hubs. DeJoy's plan may save costs on big truck travels to neighborhood post offices and more efficiently sort the mail, but the added transportation costs of the smaller delivery vans will actually cost the USPS $2 billion per year, according to independent postal expert Steve Hudkins. Hudkins also estimates that individual mail carriers will incur an additional $3,000 in annual personal transportation costs with this plan. As I stated earlier, the displacement of mail carrier units from the rear of post offices most often leads to reduction in retail hours and services to the public. Andover Post Office is open 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., hours that are convenient for most working people. Postal clerks are in the post office much earlier than that, sorting and distributing mail and parcels for the mail carriers. So customers, residential and business, can come early, maybe as early as 6 a.m. to the caller window if they don't require a monetary transaction. I don't know if Andover Post Office has this feature, but mid-sized post offices do. My post office does. It's a Dutch door where the top opens and there's a shelf where customers and clerks can write and place parcels. Andover Post Office is also open on Saturdays, and the lobby is accessible 24 hours for post office box holders and anybody who needs to get in and out of the elements. Andover Post Office also accepts bulk mail drop-offs, probably at the back dock, where the clerk not handling the retail window can interact with the customer. Customers can also often drop off and pick up parcels at the back dock outside of retail hours if there's a clerk out there sorting the parcels. Andover Post Office also handles passport applications. Past experience with the removal of mail carrier units from these mid-sized post offices leads us to predict that the Andover Post Office will lose clerk positions, leading to reduced retail hours and caller hours. This means many working people and businesses will be unable to access postal services in Andover, may have to travel to Woburn for their postal business. Andover will probably lose bulk mail acceptance, early and late caller services, passport services, Saturday hours, and 24-hour lobby. Back in 2012, the last time we faced huge reductions in post office hours and number of post office closures, the USPS Office of the Inspector General issued a report. Here's the summary. What if instead of closing post offices, cutting window hours, getting rid of career postal workers, and selling off post office buildings, the Postal Service had a different vision? What if brick and mortar post offices were seen as vital community hubs with a lot of potential for bringing in new sources of revenue, such as public internet access services like Wi-Fi and computer kiosks, offering government services on behalf of federal agencies like signing up for Social Security and Medicare, government services on behalf of state and local agencies like paying traffic fines, acquiring fishing and hunting licenses, renewing drivers and vehicle licenses, etc. Banking services such as savings accounts, check cashing, foreign money orders, electronic money transfer, prepaid cards, other financial services like retirement planning, insurance, e-bill paying for utility, medical, credit cards, etc. Selling packing materials and offering packing services, cell phone products and services, fax and photocopy services, notary services, greeting cards, calendars, stationery, etc., automatic teller machines, ATMs. You see where I'm going here. And these often are offered in foreign postal services. We haven't quite caught on yet. But the Office of the Inspector General also mentions having the Postal Service get into leasing and warehouse services rather than, quote, shedding excess capacity, unquote, as the Postal Service puts it. Why not do something with the space? Many of the post offices being closed and sold are right in the middle of busy downtowns. The space in the back where the carriers used to work could be rented out to all sorts of retail businesses, offices for professionals, government and social service agencies, etc. Anyway, you get the idea. Save, improve, and expand our postal service. So how can we slow, pause, and stop the displacement of our letter carriers, the degradation of our post offices, and move to improved and expanded postal services? Unfortunately, our national institutions, from the Postal Regulatory Commission to the U.S. Postal Service Office of the Inspector General to the National Postal Unions to the U.S. Congress, have not taken up this fight. So it's up to us at the local level to shine the light, build up the pressure. We must hold town meetings like this one across the country, involve elected officials from town councilors to members of Congress, draw media attention, call for hearings before the Postal Regulatory Commission, the Office of the Inspector General, the U.S. Congress, call on our state's attorneys generals to sue the Postal Service, demanding an accounting of this latest boondoggle. We've seen in the past that the Postmaster General will move when confronted with this kind of pressure. If you live in a town, those of you who are watching this live stream especially, if you live in a town scheduled to be impacted by these postal changes, think about organizing to fight back. For more information on DeJoy's plan and a list of the first 200 post offices on the chopping block, check out SaveThePostOffice.com. And on Facebook, Save Our Postal Service. The American Postal Workers Union has a toolkit for fighting consolidations at apwu.org/fighting-consolidations. Thank you for your time. Thanks to Bill Colby for putting this meeting together. I'm happy to try to answer questions when we get to that point. And we can do this, people.
Excellent. Thank you, Jamie. Jamie, are you still on the phone?
I am.
Any questions for Jamie while we have him on the phone? Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Jamie. And Peter? Peter Blunt? Yeah, come on up. There you are.
Hello, folks. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and those viewing online. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here for tonight's meeting. As a recent retired letter carrier from Andover, I've been asked to provide some feedback in reference to the proposal by the postal management to have multiple towns, including Andover, operate from the Woburn facility. I had a chat with the Carriers Union representative prior to tonight's meeting, and I've made some changes to the level of disagreement I have with the proposal. I was informed that the union is just as concerned as I am regarding the safety of the carriers driving to and fro on Route 93 and 128 during primarily rush hour traffic in vehicles that are approximately 35 years old. If the proposal is enacted, the carrier routes will be adjusted to include the travel time, with the end result being more carrier jobs. That's why the union is pro this proposal. This proposal is scheduled for approximately spring of 2023. I'm unsure how many carriers will be hired. Presently, there is a shortage, as was outlined by the prior gentleman. But that still doesn't address the 35-year-old vehicle issue. Just wait till some carrier is forced off the road, because the top speed of these vehicles is roughly 45 miles an hour. And with the top portion of these vehicles only aluminum, wait till there's a good stiff breeze. So as a sideline, 3:30 this afternoon, I said, okay, I'm going to go to Google Maps, and I'm going to punch in Andover Post Office to the Woburn Post Office, 93-128. It came back with 20-minute drive, 14.5 miles, but it's sunny, it's dry, and at 3:30 there's hardly any traffic. So at the end of the day, the Andover carriers, if they finish at roughly 4 o'clock, they go down Lowell Street, hook up at 93 by IRS, go down 93 to the interchange by 128, and they go to the post office and they unload. If somebody has a flat tire, somebody has a bad blinker, there's a car accident, somebody stopped on the other side of the road, the stadia or whatever, you're going to maybe go 3 miles an hour for who knows how long. So, and I speak from experience, the cooling system for the carriers is a dash-mounted 4-inch fan that pulls air from the firewall, which is hot air. The heating system is a small under-dash mounted fan that is supposed to have air tubes to blow heat at the feet of the carriers. Most of the vehicles do not have the tubes. You can crank that heat up all you want. The end result is you put your left foot against the transmission housing to get some heat in your body, and your right foot, So, to conclude, my biggest concern of the carriers driving on Route 93 and 128 for approximately 1 hour among vehicles going in and out of the lanes 50 to 65 miles an hour, and wait till there is a traffic tie-up and the carrier must sit in their vehicles for a half to an hour, maybe to get some sort of replacement. And I have to re-emphasize another trepidation here. There is no bathrooms in those vehicles. Kidney stones comes to mind. So driving on 28, all the stoplights and all the congestion at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that's another idiot move. So the post office delivers, if the post office delivers the new vehicles next spring, That's a different story. They are made to go highway speeds. But this is management and this is delivery of new vehicles, so you figure out what might happen. Therefore, I'm not in favor of this postal proposal, as the lives of the carriers are not to be toyed with, just because the bean counters thinks it's a great idea. I challenge the bean counters to drive on Route 93 and 28 in a 45-mile, maybe, vehicle, 35 years old plus, deliver your route, and then go all the way back and break down your mail and blah, 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 and then go home from Woburn. I'm looking at a 12-hour day, even if the routes are adjusted and cut down to maybe 4.5 to 5 instead of 8 hours. Now, this does not include the carriers who make the 5 o'clock collection at the collection boxes. They have to then jump on 93 and 128 or 28 and go all the way to Woburn. So that's my viewpoint as a retired letter carrier. Any questions? Yes?
If the vehicles can only go 45 miles an hour, are those vehicles allowed on highways? Isn't there a minimum speed on 93?
They are allowed on the highway. I've seen other LLVs. They're called LLV, long life vehicles. Yes, they are allowed on the highway. I wouldn't trust them to go that fast.
I was just concerned there was a minimum speed limit on the,
Yes, it's approximately 45, you're right.
Federal's exempt from state law.
Okay, so, yes,
Do these 35-year-old vehicles have the same inspection laws that everybody else does?
no. There's no airbags. I doubt there's any safety glass. There is emergency brake. There's relatively little else besides the engine and the top of the vehicle. Now, I forgot to mention, I checked with somebody who did repairs on these vehicles. And he let me know that almost every vehicle has an average of 3 times to be in the shop for a major repair each year. And I also forgot to say that if one of these carriers has a breakdown on the highway and it's 95 degrees out there, you can't get up and leave that vehicle. You have to stay with that vehicle because there's federal products in that vehicle. And if it's 5 degrees out there, good luck with that. There's no heat if the engine don't run, even if you can get any heat out of it. Any other questions? Very good. And thank you, Bill, for inviting me.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good evening.
Oh, we have a question.
Just curious, what is the miles per gallon on those vehicles?
Stop and go around town is roughly between 3 and maybe 8. On the highway, you might get 7. These are old, if anybody remembers, Chevy Chevette came back out many years ago, a little runabout scooter. It's got a 4-cylinder engine in it. That's what's powering this thing. They are made for in-city or rural driving. They are not made to go on the highway. There's no spare tire. There's no toolkit. There's no flares. It's a chassis with an aluminum box on top, and that's it. Now, let me give you another sidelight. When I first started at the post office in Andover, there was a gentleman, he was up around the Gloucester area in one of the towns right by the water. He's doing his business, doing the route, and he's going along the edge of the ocean, seashore, right? Big gust of wind came up. Guess what happened? The thing just rolled around, all the glass busted out, mailboxes everywhere. He was bruised. He didn't get cut from the glass and everything. He was extremely lucky not to get hurt. But that's what happens with these vehicles. There is no weight to them. There's no traction in snow. If you are trying to go up a hill and it's icy, find another road. Bring that mail back for that day. They don't work. So, yes, question.
I have a question. So I just want to confirm, you've told the people that are making this decision all about the vehicles and their limitation, and they still want you to go ahead? I don't understand how you're presenting all this data. It seems so clear to me that it's unsafe.
Correct. I personally have chatted, like I mentioned, with the letter carriers union locally. And the reason why he's for this proposal is because more jobs will be created. More people will have better than minimum wage jobs, okay? But that doesn't mean it's still safe. And as far as me communicating with the folks down in DC, I do not have any contact with them. The gentleman who is now running the post office, who I'm not really particularly fond of, and all his business dealings, he's out of his mind as far as I'm concerned. Anybody else?
How many vehicles are you talking about making this loop back and forth between Andover and Woburn?
I took a rough guess. There's roughly 30 routes in Andover. Tewksbury, let's just say there's 30 routes in every town. And there's 5 towns. There's 150 vehicles on 128 and 93 going 45 miles an hour. And maybe getting 6 miles a gallon.
To say nothing of the congestion once they get to Woburn and they're trying to get out
Correct.
in the morning to...
Yeah, this is all during almost all rush hour traffic. Because right now, we start roughly 8 o'clock, right? Okay? And everybody comes from Manchester and Lowell and wherever. And they go to Andover. Now, on their own time, they're going to be schlepping all the way down to Woburn. And at the end of the day, they're going to be schlepping home. It's going to be a 12-hour day. And as the gentleman on the phone says, all that travel time is going to come out of their back pocket. Anybody else? All right, thank you again, Bill.
Thank you, Peter. And now we're going to have Dave Stager be a minute from Michigan.
Hello.
Dave,
Hey, I'm going to mute it. Okay.
you're all set. You have a very captive audience. Take it away.
Okay, am I on now?
You're on.
Okay, all right. Hi, thanks for having me. I was watching it on time delay, so I was still listening to the last speaker's speech or talk and answer the question, really good questions. Good evening. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. As Bill mentioned, I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I'm a rural letter carrier. Kalamazoo is also one of the areas on the list of proposed sorting and delivery center consolidations tentatively scheduled here for February of next year. I'm in West Michigan. Kalamazoo is a small town, and then rural areas around here. There's a number of practical problems that I see with this proposed plans, and the 2 previous speakers addressed some of them. First for me is the lack of information. I've heard nothing directly from USPS about the specifics of this plan, even though it's supposedly scheduled to have a major impact on our area in the near future, on customers, on employees. So number one to me is much more transparency is needed. I believe that USPS should be holding public meetings like this one, and to get feedback from customers and postal workers. If it's a plan that makes sense in an area or more than one area, then it should be able to stand up to questions and the scrutiny of the light of day. So, I'm wondering why aren't they rolling it out and presenting it to the public to get feedback? To me, that makes me think they're not confident in it. And as Jamie mentioned, there's already been pushbacks on parts of it. So, roll it all out, let us all look at it and give our feedback. And then it should be revised and fixed or dumped before instead of just moving forward with it. Secondly, some of the drive times, as mentioned under this plan in this area, are nearly 30 minutes one way just to get from the proposed sorting and delivery center to the local rural post offices affected by this plan. These times are based on, as the previous speaker said, on taking high-speed freeways in many cases. Most of the current postal vehicles, as was said, are not built for these roads because they begin to shake at over 45 if they can get there at all. So many of the travel times would be well over half an hour here one way. Often carriers' routes begin more than a 20-minute drive beyond that office, so there could be an hour each way just to drive from the sorting and delivery center to their routes. And these times are projected by Google Maps on a clear summer afternoon, not during rush hour, and don't include trips to and from local post offices before and after completing their routes to pick up and drop off packages that are being held for customers that require signatures, vacation holds, and other mail like that we would have to go to the post office, the local post office, before and after our routes. On some winter days here, or with construction and traffic, it could easily take twice that time. So you're talking, easily over an hour each way just to get to the post office area, and then much more beyond that to get to the route. So this plan will add many extra miles and wear and tear on, as was said, an already overburdened postal fleet. The LLVs, the white boxy postal vehicles that we deliver and delivers most of the nation, that we deliver in and delivers most of the nation's mail, were originally designed, my understanding, to last 24 years, but many are much older than that. Like I said, average 35 years or so. The postal maintenance fleet team, in my opinion, does a great job, of repairing them and keeping them going, but there's often a shortage of working vehicles, and the added miles of this plan would exacerbate that problem. And then the amount of fuel and energy used for all these delivery postal vehicles to do trips from central spot many miles away out to the routes and back rather than from a local post office that's relatively close by seems to me like a large waste of time, fuel, and energy. It doesn't seem like the cost would be recouped by the fact that the larger postal mail trucks would have to deliver mail and parcels that we deliver to and from less places under the plan. And I believe that the added commute time for carriers will add to the staffing problems currently facing USPS. At my workplace, dozens of rural carrier subs have quit since I began at the post office just over 5 years ago. And many of these have been veteran subs with a year or more experience and learned knowledge of 20 or more routes. So they quit after thousands of dollars was spent on each of them in training and gaining that experience. And under DeJoy's S&DC consolidation plan, I believe even more people, especially subs, will quit because they will not be willing to or financially able to make the long drive to work every day. I see the cars in the parking lot, and I know these carriers, and some of them are lucky to get to work in the vehicles they have. So adding that extra commute will just rule them out. Finally, I'm concerned that and also on that, the safety of just the long days. When I first started, I worked 30 days in a row as a sub, 7 days a week, often 12 or more hours a day. And adding more and more hours in driving just becomes a real safety concern for the carriers, as was mentioned earlier. Finally, I'm concerned also that this plan will be bad for customer service. Many people rely on post office to get what they need, including their medicines, paying their bills, and to ship to and from their businesses. So potential staff shortages, more fatigued carriers, less clerks at these rural post offices may hurt postal window and delivery service. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you, Bill, for inviting me, and I'm willing to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Questions? Thank you, Dave. Very informative.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
Same. Scott?
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scott Hoffman. I'm the current president of Boston Metro Area Local APWU. We have a little over 2,000 members. We cover the metropolitan Boston area and also Cape Cod. I myself am a 34-year postal worker, and I've worn every hat just about there is, in the clerk crafts, from working in the plants to the post office in Chestnut Hill and Roslindale. I'm here to tell you that they're trying to sell you a bill of goods. There's nothing good about this. Your service will be degraded. And I'll give you some history lessons because they try to move like this in areas that I cover. And when I want to talk to you today, yes, the previous speakers are correct. You'll take a hit on how many clerks there are. Even though it takes 10 hands to get the work done here, somehow you only need 8 hands in Woburn to handle, Andover's mail. So whenever they make a move like this, they cut the staffing. Service gets degraded. So I want to speak to you, less about bemoaning the fate of my members, but I do want to talk to you about the fate of you as postal customers. You will suffer. And I'll give you an instance of the disingenuous type facts and figures that they throw out. About 6, 7 years ago in Somerville had one of those big ornate WPA post offices, and they did all the business in the Somerville post office. But they wanted to look good on paper and we're going to save money. So they sold that beautiful building for a song and a dance, about $2 million, who knows what it's worth now. And they put forth facts and figures while it was going to save the post office money and therefore be for the betterment of the postal service. So they ended up having to, take a building that they owned, that they sold, they try to say that's profit. Look what we did. And then they housed the Somerville carriers and put them in the Chelsea facility, the IMC. So, they said, we've done the time studies on the travel, and it's still more economical. Well, it was economical that year, but the subsequent years, their savings, dry up, and it becomes a cost. Because if you get rid of a building you own, and then you have to replace it with rents, because they're going to have another retail presence in Andover. So the money they save on selling the Andover facility, it will dry up within a few years, renting in a strip mall to have a retail presence. Again, it'll dry up what profits they say they make. And in Somerville, they did the analysis on how long it would take to get to the various routes from Chelsea. So they came up with their figure, 20 minutes, 22 minutes, and that's still cost effective. But they did the studies at 2, 3 in the morning. Within a year, in overtime, they blew all the money that they said that they were earning, because going from Chelsea to the far reaches of Somerville, maybe at 2 in the morning it takes 20 minutes, but in the morning when you're heading out, in reality, you're at the tail end of rush hour. It may take 45 minutes to an hour. But coming back to the Chelsea facility was taking an hour and a half, because you're in the throes of the deep rush hour. So when they put forth their facts and figures on savings, they're they really are disingenuous. It ended up costing the Postal Service more money on fuel costs, additional repairs on vehicles because you're wearing them and using them more, carrier overtime. I know that sounds good, but I mean, it does wear and tear on a carrier sitting in a vehicle in traffic day after day. So it's a morale buster, but it's also takes a toll on the employees, and there is no economical savings. And when you have to, instead of your product, your mail service coming directly to Andover, so if there's a late truck, your package is in Andover. They can send it out. They could, a supervisor or a clerk could write it out to the carrier to give it to them to deliver because it came late. They're not going to do that when the package is in Woburn. They're not going to do those late minute adjustments that they can do when your mail, your business is in Andover. It's a quick fix, but that's not a fix they're going to be willing to do when everything's back in Woburn. So if the next morning you come down because you weren't home and there was one of those notices left, attempted delivery, we find that when they make these moves, the piece has to go back to Woburn, and then the next day they bring it back to the retail unit. Whereas before, you could come back to the office later and maybe pick up that piece, or you could get there earlier in the morning because it's in that facility. Now it's in Woburn, and you have to wait for it now to be reshipped up to whatever retail presence remains in Andover. So it is a complete, degrading of your service, no matter what they say. It's common sense. If it used to come right here, then it's available here. If now they ship it over there, and then you have to bring it here, then back there, then back here, it's only common sense. And reality is dictated that the service, degrades. The theme here as well, and again, I'm not here for my members. I want to talk, of my service. It's a service that's been around for 200 years. It's in the Constitution. It's the backbone of commerce in this country since this country started. It's the envy of any competitors. And I'll give you an example. FedEx and UPS, they're the big boys, right? We do in one day what they do in a year. That's the magnitude of the infrastructure of the Postal Service. And this is degradation of the infrastructure. It's corporate America is employing the death by 1,000 cuts methodology. Because as they take a piece away, it's now impossible to replace. So this is just one in a series of moves to get us away from having a public postal service with uniform rates into a privatized entity. So, it looks innocuous, but it's not. It's part of a bigger plan. This goes all the way back to, 2006, when Congress passed the Post Office Accountability and Enhancement Act. Sounds good, right? But that was the legislation that said that the Postal Service had to fund their retirees' pensions and benefits, health benefits, for the next 70 years. So the Postal Service, that's a unique obligation and burden that no entity, public or private, has ever had to do. So even though the business model of the Postal Service turned a profit, when Congress would tax the Postal Service with that pre-funding mandate, on paper it looked like we were losing money. But it wasn't. It was a special tax levied only on the Postal Service. So, the wheels have been in motion for years. The Postal Service is being done in from within. And I don't think it came to light how important and integral the Postal Service really is in communities. You know, it's a focal point. It brings in businesses for small business. And we go to everybody's house. UPS doesn't. They may hit your street, one or two houses. Amazon, UPS, but we go to everybody's house every day because we have the wherewithal and the means to do it. And private industry knows they can't compete with that. So what do? They got to knock us off our perch. You know, case in point, back when the anthrax scare hit, the plan the government had, if they ever had to get out antidotes for anthrax, was going to be delivered by the Postal Service because we go there anyways. So be careful of these slippery slope type scenarios where they just say, oh, it won't really matter. It doesn't, it's good for the post office. It's not. They're not going to save money. These type of plans, you know, and again, the anthrax was going to go to each house when they finally authorized the COVID tests, the free COVID tests for at home. Who delivered those? The post office. They didn't trust the private companies to do it because they'll get around to it when they get around to it. We delivered them, you know, that's who they gave that to because that was such an important thing because we have the infrastructure. The gentleman before, you know, talked very well, Peter, you know, on the trials and tribulations of those vehicles. They're horrific. They break down all the time. They only hit 45 miles an hour if you're lucky. They're a disgrace. Somebody asked, well, what about this? So they're not subject to state laws and regulations. It's the federal government. They put us out on those tuna cans with no heat, no air conditioning. They break down all the time, like you said. Then now you're stuck, you know, having to stay with the vehicle because you have, you know, federal property in there. People's correspondence and products. So you have to safeguard it. I heard all the, you know, on this and that, but I go to New Hampshire sometimes on the weekends. No one's mentioned being stuck in that kind of traffic on a Friday trying to get up or back. You know, if there's not enough carriers here and they have to go back and pick up some, you know, another carrier got sick on their route, got heat exhaustion from driving around in the tuna can, what now? You got to go back to Woburn, then come back through the traffic? They'll be out till late at night. So it's really... It's only a plan that can be run down on the uneducated or the apathetic. Because if you care, you'll stand up and you'll fight for the post office. You know, DeJoy, we've heard him. He's the quintessential fox in the hen house. He comes from the trucking and logistic industry. He's been fined for having improper overcharging of the Postal Service. This is before he was named Postmaster General. His companies were fined for overcharging the Postal Service on the contracts he had, the trucking contracts. So who do they put in charge? Somebody that's already robbed them. Look it up. So in this case, someone else always mentioned too, they're taking things off airplanes. There was a time when the Postal Service had, what was it, Eagle One, or what the hell was it called? They had they had their own airplanes. Our competitors are keeping everything on airplanes. They're beefing up their air game, hiring pilots, buying planes, hangar space, contracting out. Because I don't think I'm giving you a revelation. I think it's quicker by airplane than it's by truck. But we're taking stuff off airplanes to put them on DeJoy's trucks. So any plan he has is twofold. Work towards privatization and line his own pockets. His designs now have all these surface transfer centers, half of which he owns the property anyway, so now you're leasing a building off one of his subsidiaries to put them on his trucks We're being robbed here. I guarantee that this will, right now, they use postal truck drivers to get the mail from the plant to Andover, and they probably have a circuit where postal employees deliver that mail to Andover and Wakefield. What they'll do now is say, we don't need those runs because we're consolidating everything into one big truck, my truck, to bring it to Woburn. So this is bed feathering 101. And all I could say is thank Christ he doesn't own a stable with horses, or we'll be doing mail on a Pony Express. So to me, it's detrimental to the town. It's detrimental to the customers. I heard somebody say bulk mail. When they get rid of the larger size Andover post office that's fully functional on its own, and small businesses can drop off bulk mail there. When they convert it into a small retail presence in a strip mall, they won't accept bulk mail anymore. So now those customers that want to get their flyers out, the pizza menus with the coupons on them, now instead of being able to drop them off in Andover, they'll have to go to Woburn or Boston. So again, that's, cutting their nose off to spite your face type. You have the ability to take in this work, but they're going to change it so that it makes it more difficult to even insert mail into the system from the customers. Business pickups, like you said. If the mail's in Woburn, then you can't be knocking on the door in Andover at 7 and saying, can I have my pickup mail? Where right now, the clerks could have it ready and you come pick it up. Now the clerk's going to tell you, yeah, I'll give it to you when it comes up from Woburn. Because you won't have a self-sufficient post office anymore. So I know I'm throwing a lot of things at you and it's all negative, but it's all researchable. It all is. Again, you'll show over the years that everybody was saying the post office is, they're losing money. Well, that was the story. But again, the business model made money. Only the $100 million. But then when you have $100 million minus a $5 billion bill to finance retirements of people not even born yet, again, it was a manufactured crisis to make the Postal Service look like it was failing. So this ruse has been going on for quite a while, is my point. Does anybody have, any questions? Yes?
What can we do about this?
Raise hell. Because I was involved in the post office proposals of closures in the Boston area. I can only speak to, the community meetings that the community showed up. And when the community show up, guess who else shows up? The politicians show up. And then the politicians get the flavor, hey, wait a minute, if I can glom onto this because it seems pretty popular, now you did what you had to do. Because in the end, they proposed to close 14 post offices in the Boston area. Most of them were in the less affluent communities and disenfranchised locations. But it made a big difference when the community wrote to the, in this case, you need to go to your federal contingency, your Congress, senators, but let them know. Markey was really helpful during the election. I'll give you another DeJoy story. He came in and he ripped out over 260 machines that sort mail out of the large plants right before the election. And the reason why, and you heard a couple of the speakers say there was intervention by federal judges, because they believed that that was being done to impact the Postal Service's ability to handle the election mail, and in particular the mail-in ballots. So that's how the federal injunctions got put in place that made him stop removing that machinery and stop changing service standards leading into that election. To me, that was an instance where I think the Postal Service, from my point of view, preserved democracy, because it's a means and method to vote. You look in those disenfranchised communities, when you work 2 and 3 jobs, when are you going to get to vote on vote day? You don't. You can't. It's either eat or vote. I got to eat. So, mail-in voting is critical to this, to democracy itself. And you got a guy at the helm that was trying to do in that ability. It's voter suppression was involved in it. I'll go here, but I got to go here first. Peter.
Getting back to the, thank you, Bill. Getting back to the advance payment for retirees. The first thing I thought of when I heard that that was going to occur is the privatization of the post office. Because at that time, there were roughly 300,000 due-paying members in the Postal Service, carriers only, not including the clerks and the shippers and all of this. And like you say, if you can knock down that peg, just a couple of things every year, next thing you know, oh, we're not making any money. Oh, we have to turn it over to a corporation.
Well, that's the road. They're still not at the point where they can pull the rug out from the public and say to post office, that's it, it's done, we're privatizing. The people aren't that deep asleep. But these type of actions are setting it up so that they can degrade the institution itself to the point where they will finally be able to say it's not self-sufficient and it can't get the job done, because what they're doing now is equal to pulling a truss or a support beam on a bridge and taking it out and eventually saying, hey, this bridge is no good. Well, of course, you've been degrading the structure. So, again, the point I brought up at how big we are, it took us 200 years to build up the infrastructure to be able to service the public and be able to go to their house every day and have the machinery to sort the mail, have the motor vehicles force that can get the mail to the post offices, have enough letter carriers to get it to your house. I don't represent carriers, but my brother's one. And obviously, I have many friends that are. They can't keep carriers now. Their temporary help turnover is in the 60%. The CCA's turnover is in the 60 percentage. Why? Because they're making the job, gruesome. What are you gonna sit there? Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, so one other thing I'd like to bring up.
1 second, we just have a comment here from somebody calling in. Can we just have?
Sure.
Yeah, just hold on. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can I go now?
You're on.
Okay, sorry. Hello. My name is, sorry, I wasn't sure if there was like a lag in which I was watching this live or not. My name is Emily Yen. I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is another community impacted by this plan for consolidation of delivery units. And I've been doing some postal organizing with the Democratic Socialists of America, as well as a couple other groups over the past few years, and wanted to share that, or sort of share when you're thinking about what to do, I wanted to share one sort of action that has been very useful is writing to your congressional reps, as well as your about holding a hearing to stop this plan. While they don't have direct power to stop this particular plan, they do have the power to call upon the Postal Board of Governors to have a hearing with the board. And oftentimes, as we've seen over the past few years, these congressional hearings get a lot of media attention, and it is something that the board actually pays attention to. So, and so it would be very useful to write letters as well as get several other, of your neighbors or other community members to call upon your congressional reps and senators to that state that you object to this plan for the reasons that were mentioned, and to request a hearing with the Postal Board of Governors. Thank you.
Thank you very much for calling in.
Okay, so if everybody here is somewhat familiar with the ratings of the jobs in America, if I remember correctly, being a member of the Postal Service, not financially viable, but service, in America is rated as the #1 most trusted job in America.
You're right.
If this continues, we're going to be down around 403.
Right.
So anyway,
We'll be right
I
behind
wanted
the
to bring that up.
collection agency of the IRS. But the bottom line is, you're right, in polls for about the last 20 years, the Postal Service always tops it as the most trusted government service there is. You don't get that because you didn't deliver. But plans like what we see are going to impact that. If they make it more difficult for you to get mail into the system, if they make it more difficult for you to get, involve yourself in a retail unit because the line's out the door because they've cut the staffing, or, to me, half the time the public doesn't even know that they just got half shafted because it happens in the back room. To me, we're there. If we don't speak out as postal workers and expose what's going on, then we're part of the problem. But these kind of moves don't work. In a smaller scale, I'm here to tell you, they're already contemplating, changing up what they did in Somerville. Of course, when they packaged it, 8, 9 years ago, it was going to be the cost saver. Don't worry, Somerville, your service will not be impacted. Well, it has been, all in a negative way. And right now, their savings is now deep in the red because, people get paid to, we want change, we want to do this. They say numbers don't lie, but the people that put the numbers together do. So you can manipulate figures, and that's what they do. So even if you call, and one of the callers was right, they're trying to fly it under the radar, because if they close a post office or want to curtail the hours, there's statutes and even postal regulations that require community meetings and input. And those are the ones I referred to where everybody raised hell and they ended up backing off because, we did get the community in an uproar. We did get the politicians involved, whether they believed in the cause or just thought it was fashionable. I don't care why you're involved as long as you're helping. But, that's how you go about it. I lost my train of thought here, but that's what you need to do to save it. Because this move right now, technically, they're not decreasing the hours of the post office. So they're not closing down a post office or service in a town or where there formerly was. So in a technical sense, they don't need to have a community meeting. So this is a slippery way to get out of having to release facts and figures and face the public. So this, this is an end-around move, and again, those towns that are here, Wakefield, Andover, was it North Reading, Middleton, and I'm missing somebody. Tewksbury, sorry. They're all going to have a negative impact. And again, I wanted to speak more to that, your negative impact, because these guys are going to do a good job of putting up the flare on how it's going to negatively affect them. And again, I will say, whenever they make a move, it's an opportunity to shed themselves of a clerk or two. So when they do this, there ultimately will be less clerk jobs, and obviously if there's less hands to do the work, you find postal management, well, we can't really get it all, put that over there, we'll get it out tomorrow. That's what they resort to. So, you're in for less service, period. Yes, sir.
We talked a lot about the movement of the mail, the picking up and the delivery. One of the things, you've talked a lot about the movement of the trucks back and forth and the centralizing of the distribution. One of the things that brought me here tonight was a comment that one of the clerks at the Stevens Street facility made, was about the potential for closing the Stevens Street facility, and you've alluded to that, but is there any specificity about...
Well, they have, sorry to interrupt,
but... Is there any specificity about closing particular offices as well as, the changing of the distribution mechanism?
Well, again, now once the distribution operations out of there, and we don't have the carriers there, what do we need this big cavernous building for? So it's usually a 2 or 3 step process. So right now, they'll say, well, we have no intention, but if you look at history, all the other places they had no intention, that's what they do. So I would be curious, since the Postal Service has been, tight-lipped and not sharing the details, they're just giving you the, not even the Reader's Digest version, the fluffy version. Oh, it's going to be great. It won't impact you at all. But they're not putting facts and figures out, or what their true intentions are beyond February. And again, that's when you start, when they have to fork things over, and that's a lot of times when you can get the politicians involved, because where they may stonewall here or there, if Congress says we're having a hearing and you need to pony up, usually the Postal Service says we're not going to, and then you go to the federal judge, and the federal judge says, no, you've been subpoenaed by Congress, you have to turn it over. But they play that game every time. We'd have to go through it. But they're not forthcoming. They'll say, well, that's a work product, that study, and we're not releasing it to the public. It contains too much proprietary information. Like you're asking for the secret ingredient of Coke or something. It's proprietary. So the bottom line is they won't fork it over to the public until they have to. And that's when you find that the devil's in the details. So they say now they'll keep that building, but I'm going to ask you common sense. Why would they maintain a building that they got no people in? Why would they maintain a building of that size? So what the formula usually is that once they've shed themselves of the carriers in the distribution operation, then they shed themselves of that building, and now they're leasing little retail units in a strip mall. That's generally the next step, but they won't tell you that up front. It's just the natural progression. So I don't know if they are, but if I was going to bet, Vegas would have it at about 8-1 they're going to do it. So there's where my money goes. Yes.
So there aren't going to be any mail carriers or trucks in Andover, in those buildings?
No, they're gonna, the carriers are gonna report to Woburn. All the equipment necessary for sortation will be brought to Woburn. All the
So-
vehicles will be in Woburn,
So everything, we won't see any trucks parked behind that Stevens Street?
other than somebody maybe picking or dropping something off at the actual post office. But no, they'll shoot the gun off, and 5 towns worth of carriers will look like they're leaving the anthill all at once. And then they're gonna tell you it's not gonna cause more traffic, it's not gonna cause more pollution, it's not gonna cause more headaches for the towns, but you people look like you have enough brains to know that that can't be true. There's gonna be more pollution if I'm driving more.
I'm still confused as to why the Andover Postmaster is against. He's going for the plan of DeJoy, from what I
Who
understood.
signs his paycheck? Do you?
No.
Does DeJoy? That's why.
So he's, okay, all right, I get it.
All right. It comes down to that. You want to feed your family? Then you do what this plan, that's how they operate. They run the post office like the mafia. They put certain people at certain levels. You will follow this plan by hook or by crook, and that's that. So that postmaster says, I don't want to be on the you-know-what list. I don't want to get hassled, so yeah, it's a great idea, I love it. Then they'll tell him, Andover Post Office is now reclassified as a lower post office, so you need to take a pay cut or find another job. They're so dumb they don't even know when to stand up for themselves. I'm a little biased against management, as you may tell, but like I said, if their mouth's moving, they're lying.
Want to bring up one other thing. When the large buildings are gotten rid of and post office rents smaller facilities and people can actually buy stamps and drop
Sure.
off packages and all that.
Yeah, what they come up with as an alternative, pretty much all the services would be available. It's just a more compact, they'll have a smaller box line.
Okay, so here's the question.
Okay.
At the end of the day, how does that stuff get to Woburn?
What do you mean, the dispatchers?
Whatever is,
They'll probably either have the clerks break down what's there and have a carrier pick it up as part of their route and then
so
transport it back.
some carrier schmuck
Yep.
at 6 o'clock at night has to bring that to Woburn.
Either that, or they would have maybe a motor vehicle, circuit that may pick up the dispatch, in Andover at this time, in Tewksbury at this time, in
That's what they're
Wakefield.
doing right now, so why change it?
Because this is what they want to do. You know what I mean? I can't answer that, other than it's to degrade the service and ultimately create more trucking. Well, they've never read that adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it is broke, they won't fix it, and if it's broke, they break it more. That's been my experience. Yep. All right, anything else? Well, I appreciate you enduring me, but the answer is, the caller's right. You gotta get the politicians involved, because ultimately, it's the noise we make that gets them involved. If they think they can pick up, 28 votes here today, then they're for it. And then some of them will believe in the cause. I'm not here stumping for Markey, but he was very forceful during the election carnage when they were, ripping machinery out. So I know he's an ally, and he would probably, on the Senate side, I'd reach out to him first. Not that Elizabeth Warren is not a friend of the Postal Service, but Markey, really rolled his sleeves up and got involved. Who covers up here? Catherine Clark? Who's,
We,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, they both ultimately sign on to anything that's favorable to, preservation of the Postal Service. They're not always gung-ho, but they always jump on. But those, just let them know. Their staff will let them know, hey, this issue is becoming a hornet's nest, and they'll get involved. And that's when you start to see them, calling DeJoy, get in here. We want to see your studies. You say it's saving money, but we want to see the data. And then once that happens, they start peeling the layers of the onion, and then they get to the rotten parts. So, but that's what you need to do, because as all the speakers have said, they're really tight-lipped. And anybody, if it was that great and it was that above board and it was that wonderful, people would be happy to show you, look. Anybody that's saying, hey, trust me, this is good for you, but I ain't showing you, just think. Just think. That's not for you. Somebody's telling it's good for you, but they're not telling you how and why. You all look smart here. Yes.
For us to have some verbiage to say to our legislators, I don't know the name of this act, or what do you say?
Well, just say you're concerned with the, right now, just start it out by you're hearing that there's changes in the delivery methods and degrading and closing the Andover post office operation down, and they'll look into it. They'll be aware of it, because I know the unions, I know the NALC, and I know the APWU, because like I said, my union represents the clerks, whether that be in the plant or in the post office itself. We represent the maintenance employees, whether that be fixing the high-speed sorters or the custodians in the post office, and we also represent the truck drivers. My union would be really impacted by that, because if they subcontract truck driving out to DeJoy's companies, then we lose. If they always cut down on the clerical staffing whenever they do any of these type of moves. I've been through a couple of duos. Natick went into Framingham, and Bedford went into Burlington. Those were offices that we represented, and ultimately it manifests in less staff. So it affects my clerks. Obviously, if there's smaller facilities to maintain, then there's less need for maintenance. They'll get rid of custodians and things like that. So, and by the way, postal maintenance is the number one employer of military veterans, yet they're constantly trying to get rid of those type of jobs that historically have been preserved and filled by military veterans, so it's always been a nice landing spot for veterans when they come back. The Postal Service, in and of itself, it's the highest employer of veterans with the highest concentration in maintenance. So it's, to me, if you get involved in this, you're doing a number of things. You're saving a service for yourself, for your community, and you're preserving, decent jobs, middle class. No postal worker's buying a yacht, trust me. But we deserve to send our kids to a decent school, get a couple of weeks vacation, and be able to put the groceries on the table. And that's all. That's all we really get. We get decent vacation time, but they're good middle class jobs. Not everybody's son and daughter is going to be a doctor or a lawyer or these kind of jobs. And when you work for the Postal Service, you really are doing a community service. You are a service. And part of the problem is, and I'll go back to that 2006 Act, was that in the Act itself, when Congress passed it, was that the Postal Service was supposed to run itself like a corporation, where previous to that Act, it was a government service. So they actually put in a law that the Postal Service is to be run like a corporation, and that's where you saw the postal executive salaries go through the roof, because prior to that act, the Postmaster General's salary could not exceed that of the Vice President of the United States. Now their salary structure is that of corporate America. So, you know, they're incentivized and they run it like a corporation, and we all know corporations funnel money up to the top. So therein lies the problem, that right now, you know, they're viewed and they're used as an excuse. We're mandated to run it like a corporation, when in reality, it's a public service. So I thank you guys, and ladies and gentlemen, for your time. And I hope you go out there like Johnny Appleseed, you know, and spread the word. All right, thank you.